I'm in love with my psychopathic patient." They told me he was a monster. Before I even stepped into the room, I'd heard the stories, the whispers from the guards, the headlines in the papers, the murmured warnings from my colleagues. Daniel Whittaker, the black-eyed butcher, a killer with no remorse. I'd read his file, every grim detail, the crime scene photos, the court transcripts, the witness statements. All of it painted him as something inhuman, cold, unfeeling, the kind of man who deserved the rope waiting for him in 3 months. But when I walked into that room, I didn't find a monster. I found a man who had already died. Daniel sat on the other side of the metal table, wrists cuffed in front of him, chains at his ankles. He didn't look up when I entered. He just sat there, still, empty, staring at the wall like he wasn't really seeing it. The first thing I noticed wasn't the sharpness of his features or the eerie contrast of black hair against pale skin. It was his eyes. The kind of black that swallowed light. Hollow, vacant, unreadable. I cleared my throat. Daniel?" No response. "I'm Dr. Sean Astin. I'll be handling your psychiatric evaluation." Silence. I pulled out the chair opposite him and sat down, placing my notebook on the table. The metal was cold beneath my fingertips. The air in the room felt heavy, thick with something unspoken. Daniel didn't move, didn't acknowledge me. He just blinked, slow and lifeless, like none of this mattered, like he didn't matter. Most patients, especially the guilty ones, would protest their innocence. They'd rant about unfair trials, scream about conspiracies, or break down in desperate apologies. Daniel did none of that. "I'd like to talk to you," I said, keeping my tone calm, professional. "Understand you, your thoughts, your past." "Nothing." I exhaled, watching him closely. The way he barely breathed, the way his fingers didn't even twitch against his cuffs. He wasn't defiant, he wasn't angry, he was just gone. He welcomed his fate, no resistance, no hope, just a man waiting for the noose, as if it was already tightening around his neck. "I don't expect you to trust me," I admitted. "I don't expect you to talk, but I'm not here to judge you, Daniel." Finally, he reacted. Just the smallest shift of his head, his gaze flickering to mine for barely a second. Then he smiled, a slow, humorless curve of his lips. "Then why are you here, Doctor?" His voice was soft, almost lazy, empty. I held his gaze. "Because I want to understand." Another pause, a slow blink, and then, so quiet I almost missed it, he chuckled, a dry, brittle sound. "You won't." Then he looked away again, retreating into that hollow silence. I sat there, watching him, feeling the weight of the moment press down on me. I didn't know what I expected from this meeting. I didn't know what I was supposed to see, but as I closed my notebook, one thought lingered in my mind. There was more to Daniel Whittaker than met the eye. The next session wasn't any different. Daniel sat in the same spot, same posture, staring at the wall like he wanted to disappear into it. I let the silence stretch, wondering if he'd speak first. He didn't. "You don't want to talk," I said. "That's fine. I've got time." He let out a slow breath. Not annoyed, just tired. "That makes one of us." "You're saying you don't?" He smirked. "I think 3 months is pretty self-explanatory." That quiet acceptance again. No fight. It got under my skin more than I'd like to admit. "No appeals? No last-minute pleas?" I asked. "Why? Do you think I should?" "I think most people would." He gave a soft laugh. "Most people don't know the end of their story. I do." "So you're just ready to die?" "I've been ready for a long time." The way he said it made something twist in my gut, like death didn't break him. Something else had, long before. I leaned in. "What happened to you, Daniel?" His smirk slipped just a little, then he caught himself. "Why do you care, Doctor?" I didn't know, but I felt it. Something real, something warm, and it scared the hell out of me. By the third session, nothing had changed. Daniel barely spoke. I asked questions, he dodged them, but sometimes something slipped through, like today. "You seem different," I said, watching him. His posture was the same, face unreadable, but something was off. "Don't flatter yourself." "It's not about me. You didn't sleep last night." He paused, just briefly, his jaw tightened, fingers twitching in the cuffs. Then came the smirk. "And what gave that away, Doctor? My stunning good looks?" I ignored it. "Nightmares?" He stilled. For a second, something flickered in his eyes. Raw, real pain. It vanished just as fast, buried again. "Doesn't matter," he said, voice low. "Nothing changes." I set my notebook aside. "Maybe not, but you're still here." He looked away, exhaling. "Not for long." But I wasn't so sure anymore. Something in me twisted. An ache I didn't want to name. It wasn't just concern. It was deeper than that. I was starting to care. Really care. And I knew that was dangerous. Daniel was staring at the wall again. I exhaled, leaning back in my chair. "You know, most people would at least pretend to care about their own lives." "Nothing." "You've accepted death, fine. But doesn't anything piss you off?" Silence. I tapped my pen against the table. No last words, no dying wish, no deep dark confession you want to get off your chest. Still nothing. I leaned forward, watching him carefully. "What about regrets?" His jaw clenched. It was barely noticeable, but I saw it. "Interesting." I pressed on. "Something you wish you could change? Someone you wish you could see?" A muscle in his cheek twitched. I knew I'd hit something. Then, just as fast, he exhaled a slow, controlled breath and turned his head towards me. His black eyes were unreadable, but there was something simmering beneath the surface. "You talk too much," he muttered. It wasn't much, but it was something, and for the first time, I knew I was getting closer. I hadn't realized until now, but the pull I felt for him was growing stronger, despite my best efforts to remain detached. He was a patient, just a patient, but he wasn't. Not to me. "You ever been in love, Daniel?" I asked, my tone casual, but my heart was starting to race a little faster. He scoffed, shaking his head slightly. "That's a new one. What, you writing a romance novel about me now?" I smirked. "I think that would require you having emotions." He smirked back. "Touché, Doctor." "Progress." I tapped my pen against my notebook. "So, have you?" Daniel tilted his head, mock thoughtful. "Does loving my solitude count?" I sighed. "Not if you're in solitary confinement." That actually got a chuckle out of me. Dry, barely there, but real. The sound surprised me. And maybe it surprised him too, because the amusement faded quickly, replaced by that same empty mask. He looked away. "I don't do love, Doctor," he said, voice quieter this time. I didn't push, not today. But the fact that he even answered, that was enough. I could feel something blooming in my chest, a weight that was harder to ignore with each passing day. This wasn't supposed to be a case I got attached to, yet here I was, tangled in a web of my own making. I'd never seen Daniel angry, not really. Sure, he threw sarcasm like knives and ignored me like it was his job, but anger? Real anger. That was new, until today. "I read your file again," I said, watching him carefully. "The witness statements don't add up." He didn't react, not yet. "I think you were set up." Nothing. I leaned forward, and I think you know it. His hands curled into fists. Bingo. "You're about to die for something you might not have done," I pushed. "And you're just going to sit there and let it happen?" His head snapped toward me so fast I almost flinched. His black eyes were sharp, burning. What the fuck do you want from me, Sean? Sean, not doctor. I swallowed, keeping my voice steady. I want you to fight. His nostrils flared. His fingers twitched against the cuffs. His whole body was taut, like a wire about to snap. Then, just as quickly, the fire in his eyes dimmed. He leaned back, exhaling sharply. It's too late. I shook my head. It's not. He didn't believe me, not yet, but he would. And I would be there, even if I wasn't supposed to care. I had to admit it now. There was no turning back. I was already too far gone. I shouldn't have done it. I knew that the second I left the courthouse, the weight of my own actions pressing down on me like a goddamn vice. But I had to, because somewhere along the way, I fell for him. It wasn't supposed to happen. I was his doctor, not his savior, but I couldn't watch him accept death when there was even a chance he might be innocent. Maybe it's selfish. Maybe I just can't stand the thought of losing him, because it's more than that now. He's not just a patient. He hasn't been for a long time. And so I spent weeks picking apart Daniel's case, dissecting every statement, every shred of evidence. And the more I read, the more the cracks started showing. The timelines didn't match. The testimonies were shaky. It was like looking at a puzzle where half the pieces had been jammed into the wrong places. I sat in my office, the dim light from my desk lamp flickering over the folder in front of me. His file, the one I should have just read and accepted like everyone else. Instead, I stood in front of a judge today and argued that Daniel Whittaker, convicted murderer, the so-called black-eyed butcher, deserved another chance, a re-evaluation. He didn't ask for it. Hell, if he knew, he'd probably tell me to go fuck myself. But I couldn't let him hang for something that didn't add up. My hands were still shaking when I grabbed my coat, because whether this worked or not, I knew one thing for sure. Daniel was going to hate me for this. Daniel wasn't looking at me, not today. He was staring at his hands, fingers curled around the chain between his cuffs. Something was off. The usual smirk was gone. His sharp sarcasm had dulled. "You okay?" I asked, my voice quiet, noticing the subtle shift in him that felt different from before. He blinked, as if surprised I noticed. "Why do you care?" The way he said it, quiet, almost disbelieving, hit something deep in my chest. I swallowed, a little more unsure than usual. "Because I do." His brows furrowed slightly, like the concept was completely foreign to him. "I filed for an appeal," I said. "They're reviewing your case." His whole body stiffened, his fingers tightened around the chain. He didn't look at me, didn't say anything. For the first time, Daniel Whittaker was afraid, not of death, not of prison, but of hope. And I realized then that this was what scared him most. What scared me most was how much I wanted to protect him from it all. "They postponed it!" The words hung in the air like a gunshot. Daniel blinked, slowly, like he hadn't heard me right. I sat across from him, watching every shift in his expression, what little there was. The tension in his jaw, the way his fingers curled ever so slightly against the cuffs. "What?" His voice was flat, empty. I exhaled. "Your execution. It's been postponed indefinitely. The case is being reviewed." Silence. He stared at me for a long time, his black eyes unreadable, his face blank. But beneath it, deep, buried, there was something else. Something like shock? Like he never expected this, never considered it a possibility. "Why?" he asked, voice quieter this time. I leaned forward. "Because you deserve a fair shot." His throat bobbed as he swallowed. His gaze flickered away for a second before snapping back to me. "You did this?" he murmured. Not a question, a realization. I nodded. He laughed, but it wasn't amusement. It was something bitter, something raw. "You really are an idiot, Doctor," he muttered, shaking his head. I just held his stare. Maybe. Another beat of silence. Then, for the first time, Daniel Whittaker looked at me. Not through me, not past me, but at me. And in his eyes, beneath the disbelief, beneath the bitterness, was something else. Something I didn't think I'd ever see. A flicker of hope. Daniel sat by the window of his room in the psych ward, but he wasn't looking outside. His hands rested on his lap, fingers curled slightly, as if he still expected the weight of cuffs around his wrists. "You don't have to stay in your room all day, you know," I said, leaning against the doorframe. "There's a courtyard, fresh air, people who aren't trying to execute you." No response. He just stared ahead, eyes fixed on something I couldn't see. I sighed, stepping closer. "Daniel?"
"This isn't real."
His voice was quiet, hollow. I frowned. "What?" He blinked, slow and deliberate.
"This."
He gestured vaguely to the room, the world beyond it.
"I don't belong here."
I crossed my arms. "Where do you belong, then?" He turned to me, and for a second I saw it. A ghost of a man who never expected to make it past the noose.
"You already know the answer to that."
"Eat the damn food, Daniel." He smirked, shoving the tray away.
"Not hungry."
I exhaled through my nose, trying to stay calm. "You haven't eaten properly in 3 days."
"Maybe I'm just enjoying my freedom."
He leaned back against the couch, stretching his arms out.
"Nobody can force-feed me here, right?"
I clenched my jaw. "That's not funny."
"It's not supposed to be."
He was teasing me, pushing, poking, waiting for me to snap. And God, I wanted to. But I wouldn't give him the satisfaction. Instead, I grabbed the tray and placed it back on the table. "You need to take care of yourself," he scoffed.
"Why? So I can live a long and fulfilling life?"
His voice dripping with sarcasm, but beneath it there was something raw, something aching. "Yes." He went still. For a second, just a second, I saw a flicker of something. Anger? Fear? I couldn't tell. Then, just as fast, he covered it with a smirk.
"You're really bad at giving up, Doctor."
"Yeah," I muttered, shoving the tray closer. "And you're really bad at accepting help." Some days, he talked too much. Other days, he didn't talk at all. Today was one of the quiet days. Daniel sat on the edge of his bed, elbows on his knees, staring at the floor like it might disappear if he blinked. He hadn't moved in over an hour, hadn't spoken since I walked in. I sat down across from him, dragging a chair closer. No notebook, no pen, just me. Minutes passed, the silence stretched. Then, finally, so quiet I almost missed it, he murmured,
"I don't know how to do this."
I leaned forward. "Do what?" He swallowed. His fingers twitched against his knee.
"Exist."
The word was barely there, but I felt the weight of it anyway. I exhaled. "Then don't do it alone." His jaw clenched. His gaze flickered to me, unsure, searching. I didn't push, didn't fill the silence with meaningless reassurances. I just stayed. And this time, he didn't look away. I found him outside, sitting on the bench at the far end of the courtyard. It was cold, but he didn't seem to care. I sat down beside him without a word. Minutes passed. The wind rustled the trees. Somewhere in the distance, I could hear another patient laughing. Too sharp, too wild. Daniel kept his eyes forward, arms resting on his knees. He hasn't spoken much in days. "I used to hate silence," I said eventually. Nothing. No reaction. My house was always filled with noise. My dad kept the TV on, even when he wasn't watching it. My mum talked to herself when she cooked. My sister played music so loud the walls shook. I huffed out a quiet laugh. Drove me crazy. Daniel shifted slightly. A barely there movement. Then after a long pause, he murmured,
"And now?"
I glanced at him. His gaze was still on the horizon, but his fingers twitched against his knee. "Now, I think silence is just waiting to be filled." He exhaled, shaking his head like he wanted to be annoyed, but he wasn't. Not really. For the first time, he had listened, and for the first time, I thought maybe he wanted to.
I killed someone.
Daniel's voice was flat, but his fingers curled into fists. I stayed quiet, giving him space. He stared at the floor, his jaw tight.
Not the one they think. Not the one that got me here.
My pulse picked up, but I kept my expression even. Who? He exhaled through his nose.
My father.
Silence. Heavy, unforgiving. I watched him closely. The way his shoulders had gone rigid, the way his breathing had slowed, like he was waiting for the judgment to come crashing down. I didn't give it to him. When? I asked softly. He hesitated. Then, so quiet I almost missed it, he whispered.
I was 13. It was an accident, but I have blood on my hands all the same.
I swallowed. I had expected a confession. I hadn't expected this. Slowly, carefully, I leaned forward. Tell me. He clenched his jaw, looked away, but he didn't shut down, and that was everything. I found him pacing in his room, his movements sharp, restless. I barely got the door closed before he turned on me.
Why are you still here?
I frowned. What? His hands curled into fists.
You keep coming back. You keep staying.
His voice was sharp, like he was trying to cut me with it.
Why?
I exhaled. Because I care. The words landed like a blow. His entire body went still. His throat bobbed as he swallowed.
Don't,
he whispered. I took a step closer. Why not? His breath was uneven now. His fingers twitched at his sides.
Because I don't...
He cut himself off, shaking his head, like the words were too dangerous to say. I understood then. It wasn't that he didn't care. It was that he did. And that terrified him. I didn't push. I didn't demand anything from him. I just stayed, and for once, he didn't ask me to leave. I was sitting in my office when the file landed on my desk. A thick, yellow folder, edges curled from years of neglect. Detective Calloway stood across from me, arms crossed, his expression unreadable. "That's the original case file," he said. "The one they don't want you to see." I stared at him. "What do you mean?" Calloway exhaled, rubbing a hand over his face. "I've been a cop for 20 years, Doc. I know a bad conviction when I see one. And your boy, Whittaker, he never stood a chance." A slow, uneasy feeling curled in my gut. I opened the folder. The evidence was flimsy, sloppy. Witness statements that contradicted each other. A timeline that didn't quite add up. And then, at the very bottom, buried like an afterthought, a single fingerprint. Not Daniel's. Someone else's. My pulse picked up. "Who does this belong to?" Calloway hesitated. Then, grimly, "A man who's still walking free." I snapped the folder shut. For the first time, I saw it. Daniel wasn't just broken. He had been buried. And I was going to dig him out. I should have known it wouldn't be that easy. The next day, my office was trashed. Papers everywhere, books ripped from the shelves, and on my desk, scrawled in thick black ink, "Drop it." I stood in the doorway, my heart pounding. A slow clap sounded from behind me. I turned. Dr. Edwards, the head of the psychiatric facility, leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed.
"I warned you,"
he said. I swallowed hard. "This was you?" He shook his head.
"No, but I told you. There are people who don't want this case reopened. People with power. People who will bury you if you keep digging."
I clenched my fist. Daniel was framed.
"Maybe."
His gaze was cool, unbothered.
"But some men don't get justice, Dr. Aston. Some men just disappear."
A chill ran down my spine. I was in deep, and I wasn't stopping now. I stormed into Daniel's room, the file clutched in my hands. "You were framed!" He didn't look up. I slammed the folder onto the table. "Daniel!" Finally, he glanced at me. His expression was unreadable.
"And?"
I blinked. "And? That's all you have to say?" He leaned back against the wall, exhaling slowly.
"Let it go, Doc."
Let it go? Let it go? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. They set you up, Daniel. You don't have to die for something you didn't do. His gaze met mine, steady, unshaken.
Maybe I do.
I froze. His voice was quiet, almost thoughtful.
Why does it change? You prove I didn't kill that man. So what? I still have blood on my hands.
His fingers curled against his knee.
I've been here for 7 years. Maybe this is just what I deserve.
I shook my head. You don't deserve to die for something you didn't do. Daniel let out a small, humorless laugh.
And what makes you think I didn't try proving that before?
His expression hardened.
If it mattered, I wouldn't have ended up here in the first place.
My stomach twisted, the sheer finality in his voice, like he had already lived through this fight and lost. A sharp, bitter anger rose in my chest. That's not your choice to make. He smiled, just a little.
Isn't it?
Something inside me snapped. No! I grabbed the folder, shoving it against his chest. Because I'm making it for you. For the first time, real emotion flickered across his face. Shock. And underneath it, something dangerously close to hope. The courtroom was silent. Every seat was filled. Journalists, police, people who had once called Daniel a monster. I sat beside him, heart hammering as Calloway took the stand. Detective, the lawyer said, can you confirm that this fingerprint found at the original crime scene belongs to Warren Leland? A ripple of whispers spread through the room. Leland? A man with money, power, influence. Calloway nodded.
Yes, and for years, it was buried.
He shot a cold look at the prosecutor's table.
Because someone wanted it that way.
The lawyer turned to the judge. Your Honor, we request a full investigation into this miscarriage of justice. Daniel Whittaker has been wrongly imprisoned. The words rang through the air. Wrongly imprisoned? I turned to Daniel, but he wasn't looking at me. He was staring straight ahead, his hands clenched on the table, like he didn't dare believe it. The judge sighed.
The court finds sufficient grounds to overturn the conviction. Effective immediately, Daniel Whittaker is a free man.
For the first time since I'd met him, Daniel's breath hitched. He turned to me, disbelief written across his face. I just nodded. You're free. The prison doors opened. Daniel stepped outside, the cold air hitting his face. He stood there, staring at the world like he didn't recognize it. I walked up beside him. You okay? He let out a breath.
I don't know.
Fair enough. We stood there for a long moment, the city stretching out in front of us. Then, slowly, carefully, I held out my hand. He hesitated. Then, tentative, unsure, he took it. And for the first time, Daniel Whittaker stepped forward. Not because he was being forced, but because he chose to. Daniel didn't say a word the entire ride back. I glanced at him as I pulled up to the small apartment I'd set up for him. Just a simple place, enough to give him space. He was staring out the window, eyes locked on something I couldn't see. You ready? I asked. He let out a slow breath.
No.
I didn't push. Just got out of the car and waited. After a long moment, he followed. Inside, he hovered near the door, tense. Like he didn't belong. Like he was waiting for someone to drag him back. I watched as he ran his fingers along the edge of the kitchen counter, flipped the light switch, touched the fabric of the couch like he was testing if it was real. Then, he just stood there, still. You okay? I asked. His jaw tightened.
I don't know how to do this.
I leaned against the counter. Do what? His eyes met mine, dark and tired.
Be a person again.
Something in my chest twisted. You don't have to figure it out all at once. He swallowed hard, then looked away.
And if I never do?
I didn't hesitate. Then let me be the one to help you figure it out. His fingers curled slightly at his sides. I thought he might push me away, make some sarcastic remark, change the subject, but instead, he nodded. Just barely. It wasn't much, but It was something. A week passed. Daniel barely left the apartment. He didn't turn on the TV, didn't play music, didn't do much of anything, really. I found him on the couch one afternoon, sitting in the dim light of the setting sun, staring at his hands like they held some kind of answer. "You're doing it again," I said, dropping onto the chair across from him. His head tilted slightly. "Doing what?" "Waiting for the floor to collapse." A flicker of something in his expression. He looked away. "Can you blame me?" "No," I admitted, "but you can't live like that forever." He exhaled sharply, shaking his head. "You say that like I know how to live at all." I watched him carefully. Then, casually, I reached for my jacket. "Come on." He frowned. "Where?" "Out." Daniel stared at me like I'd just asked him to jump off a bridge. "Sean, I know," I cut in gently. "I know it's hard. I know you don't feel ready, but just trust me, okay?" He hesitated. Then, to my surprise, he sighed and stood. He didn't say he trusted me, but he followed me out the door. And maybe, for now, that was enough. It was just a walk, just an hour outside, nothing special. We grabbed coffee, sat in the park, people watched. I didn't force conversation, I didn't push, but for the first time, I saw it. The tension in his shoulders easing, the way his gaze lingered on things, taking them in, the way he looked at me when he thought I wasn't paying attention. When we got back to his place, he stood in the doorway, unsure. "Not so bad, right?" I said. He let out a short, almost laugh. "I didn't spontaneously combust, so I guess that's a win." I grinned. "See? Progress." Daniel shook his head, but something about the way he looked at me then, soft, almost reluctant, made my chest feel tight. "Thanks," he muttered, like the word felt foreign in his mouth. I held his gaze. "Any time." He lingered, like there was something else he wanted to say. Then, before I could think better of it, I reached out, just lightly, fingertips brushing against his wrist. He tensed, but didn't pull away. His eyes flickered to mine, something unreadable in them. He was scared, not of me, not of this, of wanting, of having something to lose. Slowly, cautiously, he turned his hand over, letting my fingertips slip against his palms. Just for a second, just long enough to mean something. Then he pulled away, but he didn't step back, and that was everything. It started with little things. Daniel would linger when I talked. Not much, just a second too long, like he was afraid to want to stay, but couldn't quite make himself leave. Then, one night, it changed. We were in my apartment. It wasn't planned. He just showed up, looking uncertain but determined. Said he needed to get out of his place for a bit. I didn't ask questions. I just let him in. We sat on the couch, some random movie playing in the background, neither of us really watching it. The space between us was small, but it felt huge, charged. Like if I moved just an inch closer, everything would shift. Then, without a word, Daniel leaned his head against my shoulder. I barely breathed. His body was tense, like he was waiting for something. Maybe for me to pull away, to break the moment before it could mean anything. I didn't. I just sat there, feeling his warmth seep into me, the steady rhythm of his breath. Minutes passed. Then, so softly I almost missed it, he murmured, "This is nice." I swallowed my throat tight. "Yeah," I said. "It is." He didn't move, didn't pull away, and neither did I. The first time I kissed him, I didn't plan it. We were standing in his kitchen, late night. The city was quiet outside, the air thick with something unspoken. Daniel had been laughing, actually laughing, at something I said, shaking his head like he couldn't believe me. And I couldn't stop looking at him. He caught me staring. His smile faded, lips parting slightly, breath catching in his throat. For a second, neither of us moved. Then, slowly, carefully, I reached up, brushing my fingers against his jaw. He didn't pull away, just stood there, watching me. His dark eyes unreadable. "Tell me to stop," I murmured. He didn't. So I kissed him. Soft, gentle, just a press of lips, a question more than anything else. He trembled, just slightly, and for a moment I thought he might pull back. But then he exhaled, shaky and uneven, and kissed me back. Not hesitant, not uncertain, just him. When we finally broke apart, he looked at me like he wasn't sure this was real. "Okay," he whispered, like he was letting himself believe in something. I smiled, resting my forehead against his. "Yeah?" I murmured. "Okay." I found him on the balcony some time past midnight, sitting on the cold concrete floor, knees pulled up, cigarette burning low between his fingers. The city stretched out in front of him, glowing in the dark. I leaned against the doorway. "You know there's chairs out here, right?" He huffed out a quiet laugh. "Yeah, but then I'd be comfortable." I rolled my eyes and sat down beside him, the night air cool against my skin. He didn't look at me right away, just kept his gaze on the skyline like it had answers he'd never gotten. "It's weird," he murmured after a while. "I keep thinking, shouldn't I be running, waiting for it all to fall apart?" I rested my arm against my knee, glancing at him. "Do you want to?" He exhaled, shaking his head. "No, I don't." His voice was quiet, almost like he didn't trust the words. "That's the part that scares me." I nudged him lightly with my shoulder. "Yeah? Well, welcome to being human." Daniel smirked, tilting his head toward me. "It's overrated." I grinned. "Maybe, but it beats the alternative." A pause. Then, hesitantly, he reached over and laced his fingers through mine. It wasn't much, just the faintest pressure, like he was still testing if he was allowed to want this, to have this. I gave his hand a small squeeze. Let him feel it. Let him believe it. "I don't know how to say this right," he muttered, voice barely above a whisper. "But I don't think I'd be here without you." I turned to him, surprised by the raw honesty in his eyes. He swallowed, looking down at our joined hands. "I never thought I'd have this. Not just freedom. This. Someone who stays. Someone who..." He exhaled, shaking his head with a small, almost self-conscious laugh. "God, I'm bad at this." I squeezed his hand again, warmth spreading through my chest. "You're doing fine." He looked at me then, something unguarded, something real. "I love you." It wasn't planned. It wasn't dramatic, just simple, honest, like he'd finally let himself believe it was okay to say. And just like that, everything felt right. I smiled, heart full. "I love you too." For a long moment, we just sat there, fingers intertwined, the city glowing around us. Daniel wasn't waiting for the end. He was here. He was home. Years ago, it all started with something dark. A prison cell, a death sentence, a man who had already given up. I walked into that room expecting a monster, and found someone who changed my life instead. Now, years later, that darkness feels like a distant shadow. Daniel still has his moments, the ghosts that creep in when he's not looking, but he's not alone anymore. He's built something real, work he loves, a home that's his, a life he chose. And me? I'm right there beside him. He proposed last month, in the quiet of our kitchen at 2 a.m., hands shaking slightly. I didn't let him finish before I said yes. Something that started in darkness brought me the brightest thing in my life. And for the first time, Daniel isn't just surviving, he's living, and I get to live it with him. Do you think Daniel really loves Sean? Or is it just a sense of gratitude and dependence? Thanks for watching. Consider subscribing to become a part of our Rainbow Force, and stay wholesome.